Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome to the deep dive. We take a huge pile of information today. It's basically every major headline, global and domestic, from just one day, September 18th, 2025. A pretty chaotic day.
Oh, absolutely. And our job is to sift through it all for you.
Find the critical connections, the insights that last.
Yeah, September 18th wasn't just busy. It felt like a real pivot point. You saw political machines accelerating, these huge tech deals forming.
And international diplomacy really hitting the wall, all crammed into 24 hours.
Exactly.
So, our mission today: filter this intense news cycle, conflict, politics, tech partnerships, big economic shifts so you walk away well-informed, strategic, not just drowned in headlines.
We've grouped the key stories into 4 themes to make sense of it all.
Right. And we'll start on the world stage, because that's where the day really kicked off, with conflicts widening and diplomatic gaps turning into chasms.
Starting with the immediate crisis in Gaza and the major fallout at the UN.
Yeah, September 18th saw some really significant violence. Israeli forces launched a big operation in Gaza City.
And the reports highlighted it as one of the deadliest single days in the conflict. We're talking 79 Palestinian deaths reported.
That's a heavy toll, and the global reaction was swift.
It was. The European Commission, for instance, immediately started talking about proposing trade curbs on Israel because of the military action.
But the biggest diplomatic shockwave, that happened in New York, right? At the UN Security Council.
Absolutely. The United States used its veto power, vetoed a really crucial draft resolution.
And the isolation was, well, stark. This resolution called for an immediate, unconditional, permanent ceasefire, plus lifting aid restrictions.
And everyone else on the council voted for it, all 14 other members.
So the U.S. stood completely alone against the entire rest of the council.
That's right. Now, the official U.S. justification, this is where you see the strategy, or the calculation.
What do they say?
U.S. diplomats argued the resolution was flawed, critically flawed. They said it failed to condemn Hamas, didn't address their role, or the hostages.
Okay.
And crucially, they claimed it would undercut these very sensitive ongoing negotiations. Talks aimed at maybe a temporary pause, getting hostages released.
So protect the talks. Israel welcomed that position, obviously.
It did.
But if that was the goal, protecting talks, what was the diplomatic price tag for standing alone like that?
Oh, enormous. And immediate. Arab states, international aid groups, they warned the veto would just prolong the suffering for civilians.
Makes sense.
But strategically, it dug those existing rifts even deeper, not just with the Global South, but with European partners too, many of whom voted for the resolution.
So Washington's stance there creates a longer-term problem, doesn't it, when they need cooperation on other issues?
Definitely credibility issue down the line.
And the region is so volatile. That same day, didn't the conflict spill over in a quite literal way?
It did, tragically. A Jordanian aid truck driver was involved in an incident, killed 2 people at an Israeli-run crossing in the West Bank.
Wow. Just underscores how hard it is to contain this.
Exactly. It's not just Gaza. Meanwhile, you had the war in Ukraine just grinding on. And September 18th gave us this really stark contrast in messaging.
How so?
Well, President Putin made this really astonishing claim. He said around 700,000 Russian troops were now deployed in the special military operation.
700,000. Just the number itself speaks volumes about the cost, human and economic, that Russia is bearing.
It really does. But at the exact same time, Kiev was reporting localized advances in the east.
So, still a grinding war of attrition, but the lines weren't static.
Not static, no. Both sides also reported a new wave of drone attacks hitting infrastructure military targets.
Which inevitably led to renewed calls from Kyiv for more Western aid, faster delivery.
That's the cycle. And then still under this theme of global friction, you had this complex diplomatic dance around Iran's nuclear program.
All right, the U.S. seemed to be signaling in 2 directions at once.
Precisely. A classic tightrope walk. On one hand, they pulled back a censure resolution they were planning at the IAEA, the nuclear watchdog.
Okay, a step back from confrontation there.
But in the same breath, they threatened to trigger UN snapback sanctions. That's under Resolution 2231.
Okay, remind us what snapback means in this context.
Sure. So snapback is the mechanism built into the original 2015 Iran nuclear deal, the JCPOA. It lets parties reimpose all the old UN sanctions instantly.
And importantly, it bypasses potential vetoes from, say, Russia or China in the Security Council.
Exactly. So by withdrawing the censure, Washington kind of paused the public fight, but by threatening snapback, They keep this huge economic hammer hanging over Tehran, especially now that the talks have stalled.
It's high-stakes pressure,
Yeah,
trying to force compliance without firing the actual sanction gun just yet.
you got it. Leverage.
That kind of international maneuvering,
Yeah.
it leads us straight into the power shifts happening back here in Washington.
So let's pivot.
From global power plays to domestic restructuring. Because D.C. on September 18th was all about changing the rules and fighting over the budget deadline.
Yeah, the Senate confirmation overhaul. That was probably the biggest domestic structural story that day.
What exactly happened?
Well, on the 18th, the Republican leadership pushed through these new Senate rules. They're designed specifically to speed up confirmations
Ow.
by basically curbing debate time and bundling multiple nominees into a single vote.
And they tested it immediately.
Instantly. First test. They approved a massive slate. 48 executive branch nominees.
48. In one vote.
One single action. Bam. Nearly 50 administration loyalists confirmed across various agencies.
That fundamentally changes the appointment game. Supporters must have loved it.
Oh, yeah. They argued it was necessary, efficient, a way to finally break through what they saw as years of obstruction by the opposition, lets the administration actually staff up and govern.
But the flip side,
Yeah,
the Democrats' concern must be about more than just speed, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
Their point is that the ability to force individual debate, maybe even a filibuster on controversial nominees, that's a key tool for the minority party.
A check on power.
Right. And if you can just bundle 48 nominees together, that tool disappears. It erodes deliberation. It weakens minority rights in the Senate. It's a pretty fundamental shift.
And speaking of D.C. mechanics, the usual budget fight was heating up too. Shutdown deadline looming.
Yep, budget brinkmanship was back. House Speaker Mike Johnson claimed he had the votes for a short-term fix, a continuing resolution, or CR.
To avoid a partial government shutdown, at least for now.
Exactly. But, negotiations were apparently very fluid, lots of fighting over policy riders attached to the funding.
And even if they pass a CR, it just kicks the can down the road, doesn't it?
It does. It buys time, but agencies keep operating on old budgets. The real fight just gets postponed.
Failure. That means service disruptions, political chaos, never good, especially with elections always seeming to be just around the corner.
It's never good. And at the same time, you had the judicial branch weighing in on executive power. The Supreme Court agreed to take up a major case.
The one about tariffs.
That's the one, scheduled for November 5th. It directly challenges the president's authority to impose tariffs unilaterally without Congress.
That's huge. Tariffs affect everything. Supply chains, prices, global trade. A ruling could really redraw the lines between the White House and Congress on trade policy.
Absolutely critical case. Elsewhere in executive action, President Trump formally designated Antifa as a terrorist organization.
Just by executive order.
Purely executive action. And the reaction was immediate. Legal challenges, protests.
Civil rights groups jumped right in, I assume.
Instantly. They argued the designation is legally questionable, maybe even unconstitutional. Bad for free speech, bad for the right to assemble.
So that fight instantly intensified the political battle over protest, dissent, and how far executive power can reach.
For sure. And then another partisan flashpoint flared up over public health policy.
This involved the CDC?
It did. The former CDC director, Dr. Susan Monterez, testified before the Senate, and she made some pretty serious accusations against the HHS secretary, Robert F. Kennedy Jr.
What kind of accusations?
She claimed the secretary pressured the CDC to change recommended vaccine schedules and also pressured them to fire top long-serving scientists.
Wow. That puts the tension between political appointees and scientific expertise right out in the open.
Exactly. Critics immediately warned that kind of pressure could undermine the CDC's credibility, potentially roll back progress on public health. Very divisive stuff.
Okay, so we've seen structural changes in D.C., executive actions pushing boundaries. Now let's shift to the culture, the media, because the big flashpoint there on the 18th was all about political speech.
Right, and the focal point was Jimmy Kimmel.
ABC suspended Jimmy Kimmel Live indefinitely. What was the trigger?
It followed some comments Kimmel made that were seen as highly contentious. They related to the public reaction surrounding the killing of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, which had happened just over a week earlier on September 10th.
Okay, so controversial comments.
Yeah.
But the story got bigger, didn't it? Because the president weighed in.
That's what really elevated it. President Trump was finishing his state visit in the UK at the time, and he publicly praised ABC for suspending Kimmel, called the remarks horrible.
A sitting president commenting on a network's decision about a late-night host. That feels like direct pressure.
It was perceived that way by many, and congressional Democrats reacted almost immediately. They unveiled a new bill aimed at strengthening protections for media against government pressure or coercion.
So the Kimmel suspension became this sort of proxy battle.
Exactly, a proxy battle over the relationship between government and private media. It raises those fundamental questions about the chilling effect.
Even if it's not direct censorship, does that kind of public statement from the president make media companies self-censor? Or maybe punish voices they think might attract political heat?
That's precisely the concern. The proposed bill tries to create more formal buffers against that kind of political interference.
And you mentioned the UK state visit. That wrapped up on the 18th, too.
It did. President Trump and the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer concluded their talks. The UK side was definitely playing up the fact they'd secured new US investment commitments.
So economic wins for the UK?
Yes, but sources confirm there was visible tension too. Disagreements, most obviously on the outlook for a Palestinian state.
Which ties back to the UN veto we talked about earlier.
Right, and also, reportedly, disagreement over this whole U.S. media controversy involving Kimmel. So some economic deals done, but clear policy differences remained on display.
Okay, so we've hit diplomatic breakdowns, domestic power shifts, cultural clashes. How does this all connect to the money, to technology? That's our final theme for the day.
Right. The economic and tech landscape also saw some really dramatic moves on September 18th.
Starting with the central banks.
Yeah, we saw a really clear divergence in monetary policy. In the U.S., the Federal Reserve announced its first interest rate cut of the year.
Why the cut?
They were responding to signs the economy might be slowing down. And investors, well, they cheered. Markets liked the easing.
Okay, Fed easing. But across the pond.
Different story. The Bank of England kept its main interest rate steady at 4%, and they signaled they would slow down their pace of selling off government bonds. That's called quantitative tightening, or QT.
So the Fed cuts, the Bank of England holds but slows QT. What does that divergence tell us?
It tells us the major central banks are on different paths. The Fed's worried about growth, starting to ease. The BOE and probably others like the ECB and Bank of Japan are still more focused on inflation, staying restrictive, even if they're gently tapping the brakes on QT.
Okay, interesting policy split. But the real market buzz, the big energy, that came from the tech sector, right? An unexpected partnership.
Oh, absolutely. The chip détente, as you called it earlier. Nvidia announced it was taking a $5 billion stake in Intel.
$5 billion. That's about 4% of Intel, roughly.
Roughly, yeah. And the goal? To collaborate. Work together on future chips for PCs, for data centers. This wasn't hostile. It was presented as a strategic alliance.
Wow. Competitors suddenly teaming up. What was the market reaction?
Immediate and explosive. Intel stock shot up over 20%. That news, plus the Fed rate cut we just mentioned, sent the major U.S. stock indexes soaring to record highs. Huge boost of confidence.
But what's the strategy behind it? Why would Nvidia invest in Intel like that?
Well, it looks like more than just sharing tech. It feels like a defensive move, almost, a consolidation. They're facing shared pressures, right? Intense competition from AMD, the sheer dominance of TSMC in making the most advanced chips.
So teaming up to compete better against others.
Kind of. It suggests maybe these giants realize they need more cooperation now, especially to handle the complexity of AI, combining different kinds of chips, what they call heterogeneous computing. It might signal a new phase for the industry.
But even with Nvidia and Intel finding common ground, that broader U.S.-China chip friction, that didn't go away.
Not at all. Still very high tension. On that same day, September 18th, Beijing responded to reports that Chinese regulators were telling their top companies to stop buying certain high-end AI chips from Nvidia.
How did Beijing respond?
With cautious language, actually. They stressed they were willing to maintain dialogue.
Which suggests?
It suggests AI chip supply chains remain absolutely central to geopolitics. Beijing seems to be trying to manage things, push back against what it sees as U.S. tech containment, but maybe avoid a full-blown crisis. It's a delicate balance.
Yeah, fascinating. Okay, one more major global finance piece from that day. India.
Right. India's big market regulator, SEBI, the Securities and Exchange Board, they made a major announcement.
About the Adani Group.
Exactly.
Right.
After a long investigation, SEBI dismissed the key allegations of stock manipulation that had been hanging over the Adani conglomerate.
That's huge for Adani, surely.
Massive. It immediately boosted Adani stocks and bonds, calmed investor nerves about one of India's biggest corporate players, and it sort of closes a chapter on a big debate about corporate governance in India, just as the country is pushing hard for more foreign investment.
Got it. And just to round out the global picture, a few other quick notes from the 18th.
Yeah, just briefly for context, France saw nationwide strikes, anti-austerity protests, clashes in Paris over planned budget cuts. The WHO put out a report urging countries to invest just about $3 per person each year in preventing non-communicable diseases, things like heart disease, diabetes. They argued it could generate trillions in economic gains globally. Tied into that, a new U.S. aid strategy prioritizing essential medicines was noted.
Okay, health and economics linked.
And a federal judge ordered ICE to improve conditions at that detention facility inside 26 Federal Plaza in Manhattan. Plus, sadly, the world mourned Hollywood legend Robert Redford, who passed away at 89.
A truly packed day. So let's try to synthesize this. In just 24 hours, we saw major global diplomacy visibly fail at the UN.
Right, that U.S. veto standing alone.
We saw domestic political structures deliberately re-engineered with those Senate rule changes.
Forcing through nearly 50 nominees.
And we saw these unprecedented corporate alliances forming in the absolute key tech sector, Nvidia and Intel, potentially changing the future of computing.
Yeah, the sheer volume, the intensity, it's remarkable. You look at everything happening simultaneously, the Supreme Court taking that tariff case, the global ripples from the Kimmel suspension. It really reveals a pattern, doesn't it?
What's the pattern you see?
Power balances are shifting fast, both inside the U.S. and internationally. In almost every area we touched on today, established obstacles, diplomatic, administrative, industrial, they were either just smashed through or strategically bypassed, all on the same day.
It's a striking convergence.
Yeah.
Which leads us to our final thought for you to consider. Given that the U.S. justified its UN veto by saying it needed to protect ongoing talks, and the Senate Republicans justified their rule change by saying they needed to overcome obstruction and make government function.
Right, clearing the path.
What is the most significant long-term consequence when major diplomatic and administrative obstacles are cleared, or maybe just sidestepped, with such speed and determination in a single 24-hour period?
Something to think about as you process this deep dive.